This officer will not steer the debate, but they will assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols, and they will produce the minutes and provide procedural advice should we require it. I would like to remind members that the instant messaging will be visible to all of those viewing the meeting and should only be used to indicate your intentions to speak, please. Can I ask that our clerk would take the attendance register for us, please, by reading out a list of members, and in turn, if you could confirm your attendance by answering present.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. Councillor Burton.
I'm present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor English. Councillor English. I'll come back. Councillor Garton.
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
Present.
Councillor Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Mumford.
Present.
Councillor Parfitt-Reed.
Good evening all. Present.
Councillor Spooner.
Present.
I'll just check again for Councillor English.
Councillor English was having trouble with his sound, Olivia, so I think he left and is tried to rejoin.
Oh.
It does look like he's on here, but he's actually muted, according to this as well.
Oh, thank you very much, Councillor. I'll check again at another point, Chairman, as soon as he rejoins the meeting.
Yes, please do. Keep an eye out for him. Could I ask you in between time to advise us which officers are assisting us this evening and for which items on the agenda?
Yes, Chairman. So with us this evening, we have the Director of Finance and Business Improvement, Mark Green, for item 15, Interim Local Plan Review Director, Philip Coyne, Head of Planning and Development, Rob Jarman, Planning Lawyer of Mid-Kent Legal, Cheryl Parks, Strategic Planning Manager, Mark Edgerton, for item 19. Yes, that is item 19. My apologies. Heritage Landscape and Design Team Leader, Deanne Cunningham, for item 17. Principal Conservation Officer, Paul Robertshaw, for item 18. Senior Planner, Helen Garnett, for item 16. And Planning Policy Officer, Anna Ironmonger, for item 14. And myself, Olivia Parfitt, as clerk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To business then. Agenda item 1, apologies. We're a full house this evening. No apologies received.
Chairman, if I can just confirm that Councillor English is on the call, as I have instructed.
I had to leave because, like Philip, I had no sound, so I had to go out and come back in again.
So we are indeed a full house. That's very good, thank you. Accordingly, for item 2, there are no substitute members this evening. And I can confirm for item 3 of the agenda, there are no urgent items this evening. So we find ourselves at item 4. Can we take a record of visiting members, please? Do we have visiting members this evening, and which items would you like to speak to, if any?
Yeah, you've got Councillor Comanche. I'm just here seeking wisdom and knowledge. So I won't be speaking on any items, and I will be leaving rather early.
Thank you.
Councillor Perry, I'm here, a bit like Councillor Kimmers, to seek a bit of wisdom and to observe, but I do find agenda item 15 looks interesting, so I might reserve my right to speak, but probably not. But anyway,
we'll note you to speak for the time being on 15.
Yeah. Okay.
Are there any more, please? Don't think so. We'll move next to the matter of disclosures. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? If I hear no indications, we will assume there to be none. Therefore, none are noted for this evening's meeting. And at item 6, we would like to ask about lobbying. And I'll ask the clerk to run through the list of members so that they can report lobbying.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Burton.
None this evening, other than matters of the local plan generally.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
The same, just matters of the local plan.
Councillor English.
The same.
Councillor Garton.
The same, and I think I should also outline that I am the member, the MBC member representative for the Kent Downs Aonb Joint Advisory Committee, so that would apply to item 18.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Grigg.
All matters relating to local plan.
Councillor Mackay.
Likewise.
Councillor Mumford.
Items 17 and 19.
Councillor Parfitt-Reed. Councillor Parfitt-Reed.
Sorry, I'm just having problems with the muting and unmuting button at the moment. I don't know why. All items relating to the local plan.
Thank you. Councillor Spooner.
Generalised items relating to the local plan, but not specifically to item 19. But generally, I get correspondence all the time about the local plan.
Thank you, Chairman. That concludes the lobbying.
Thank you. For item 7, I'd ask you to consider for a moment whether all items should be taken in public this evening. We have no yellow pages, therefore I propose that they be taken in public, and I'll consider your silence to be consent. All items in public this evening. Item 8, may I ask you to turn your attention and recollection to our meeting held on the 9th of March last month. The minutes have been circulated as per the papers. I would like to sign these as a correct record, and unless anybody has any concerns, I move that I sign them as a correct record unless I hear dissent. I will duly do that at a later date. Thank you. Petitions at item 9. We have no petitions this evening. So to item 10, questions from members of the public. And we have one question this evening, and I'll call upon Ms. Harwood to ask that question, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Please would you confirm that members of this committee will give their full attention to the 1,700 responses received in respect of the Lidsing Garden development in the local plan, particularly as a large majority of residents living or working in Lidsing and the surrounding areas were completely unaware of this proposal until members of the public shared this information on social media and through leaflet distribution, so had very little notice to respond.
Thank you for your question. I would like to give you reassurance that the members of this committee, the substitute members, and indeed the broader membership of the council, do give attention to responses received from consultations. We consider them in some detail. The ones that you refer to were reported to us as headline at one of our more recent meetings, and we're looking forward to some more detailed analysis of those responses in due course. But I would like to reassure you that this committee will be cognizant of all of the consultation responses, including those that you have mentioned. In terms of the point at which local residents became aware of this proposal, the scheme was submitted as part of the Call for Sites exercise in early 2019, and it was subsequently published on the council's website in November 2019. However, for the first opportunity for the scheme to be consulted upon publicly was the Regulation 18B consultation, which was the point at which the council had decided which sites would be included in the preferred spatial strategy for the purposes of that consultation. The launch of the public consultation was at the end of last year and was publicised by the council in all the normal ways in which we would do so. Do you have a supplementary question?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to ask that question this evening.
Thank you.
If I could direct members to page 9 of the item 11, there are no questions from members this evening. But if I could direct members to page 9 of their papers for item 12, this is the work programme, and it is simply there for us to note, unless anybody has any specific comments they want to make on the matter. If I hear nothing, I will assume that members are content for that to be noted. And it is therefore noted. Item 13, we don't even have any reports from outside bodies this evening. And so to the first significant piece of business this evening, item 14. This is the Aonb Neighbourhood Plan concerning Regulation 17A. And I'd like to ask one of our officers, Mrs. Ironmonger, to give us a summary of that item, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Following 2 rounds of consultation, the Aonb Neighbourhood Plan was subject to independent examination. The examiner's report was received on the 4th of March and concluded that once modified, the neighbourhood plan meets the basic conditions and should proceed to referendum. The 11 proposed modifications are appended to the examiner's report and have been summarised at paragraph 2.10 of the committee report this evening. I would like to draw your attention to PM6, which proposes modifications to policy AC1 as originally drafted. This policy sought to ensure that further developments within the plan area that are not already identified within the adopted Maidstone Borough local plan do not result in the coalescence of the village of Aomb with urban parts of Maidstone. The policy identified areas of land with high or moderate anti-coalescence. The Borough Council raised concerns that the policy as originally drafted was not in general conformity with strategic policies in the adopted local plan, and certain proposals of land overlap with policy designations. This included the housing site allocation at west of Church Road, Aomb. The examiner recognised the potential risks from development on the extent of countryside around the village and the possible impacts upon the character of the village. As such, PM6 proposes to revise this policy, including renaming to Protecting the Countryside, to address the protection of the countryside around Aomb in a more generic term. The local planning authority is required to make a decision on what actions to take in response to the examiner's recommendation, so this committee can accept the examiner's report and recommendation. They can decline to accept the examiner's report and recommendation, or to accept the examiner's report and recommendation with further modifications that they deem necessary. If the council is satisfied that the Aomb Neighbourhood Plan meets the basic conditions and the other statutory requirements, then it must decide to move the neighbourhood plan to local referendum. It is recommended by officers that the committee approves the examiner's modifications and move the Aomb Neighbourhood Plan to local referendum. Thank you, and welcome any questions.
Thank you very much for your introduction. I'm not seeing any indications from members wishing to speak on this, by which I would be so bold as to say that we are in agreement with the recommendations as set out before us. There might be one person indicating. Yes, we have Councillor Garton wishing to ask a question.
Just a logistics question, Mr. Chairman. What would be the timeline for the referendum then? Obviously, it wouldn't be coinciding with the May local election.
I think you would be correct to say that. Mrs. Ironmonger, do you know if there's a planned date for the referendum?
We have, yeah, we're working on a date. A date hasn't been set, but it will be after the May election, probably in a couple of months after that, but we're yet to agree a timetable as of yet.
Okay, thank you. I'm suffering from the minuscule IM text at the moment.
Councillors Mackay and Mumford wish to speak, Chairman.
Councillor Mackay.
Good evening. This local plan comes after the land west of Church Road has been through planning, through appeal. Had this local plan been presented 2 or 3 years ago, would it have made any significant difference?
Mr. Edgerton, is that your territory to assist there, perhaps?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's important to note that neighbourhood plans have to meet basic conditions, and those basic conditions are set out in paragraph 2.13 of the report which has been presented by Mrs. Ironmonger. One of those is that it should be in general conformity with the strategic policies contained within the development plan, and that includes the site allocation policies. Therefore, given that the Church Road was a site allocation, I would say that it would not make any difference had that circumstance been different, and that the general requirements for general conformity would still apply, and the basic conditions would still have to be met. So I'm happy to say that the neighbourhood plan as it stands, and probably as it would have stood 2 years ago, wouldn't have changed.
Thank you for that answer. Councillor Mumford.
Yeah, I put my request in to speak when I thought no one was going to speak. I think the committee should recognise the effort and length of time of the volunteers, etc., that put together a neighbourhood plan. And actually today is quite an occasion for them to get it to this point. So I would like the committee to register that fact, and I'd like to move as per the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Mumford. That is most helpful, and I completely concur with you that we should recognise the work that goes into neighbourhood plans. As we've commented before, they are all the stages in parallel that we have to go through for a local plan, just on a slightly smaller scale, but a lot of work involved. So well done to everybody who gave up their time to do that. I think that was Councillor Clark seconded that motion. If I hear no dissent, I will consider it to be agreed. Therefore, that is agreed unanimously, and we shall move on to the next item, which is item 15. This is concerning the local plan review budget, and I think Mr. Green is going to help us with this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll introduce the report. Going back to the January meeting of your committee, it was recognised that the local plan is a central part of the council's strategy, and it ought to be properly funded. And the committee was concerned that there wasn't adequate budgetary provision for the local plan. So the issue was referred to Policy and Resources Committee, and Policy and Resources Committee in turn asked that officers look at the budget for the local plan. And I reported back to Policy and Resources Committee last month, and this report is similar to the one that went to Policy and Resources Committee. And it's the outcome of a great deal of work that's taken place by both finance colleagues and by planning. We've looked at all the different elements in the local plan work programme and taken a pretty robust approach to estimating what their likely costs are going to be right through to prospective adoption of the local plan in 22-23. And the results of that summarised in Appendix A, which is on page 79 of your papers. And you can see from Appendix A that we've split out what we call core funding for the local plan, and then new requirements that have emerged subsequently, and some discretionary items such as additional SPDs. We put costs alongside all of that, and the head of planning is content that this will provide a budget within which he can work. Having said that, to give us a bit of room for manoeuvre in both next year, or sorry, 21-22 this year and next year. We've put in a contingency of 30,000 to give us a bit of wriggle room if we risk going over on any of the budgets. And there's another element in the local plan work, which is the town centre plan, which can be funded separately from Section 106 contributions. So that's not included in the figures in the appendix. And what the appendix is showing is that for future years, first of all, for 21-22, there was a balance to be funded of 200,000 and a balance of 135,000 in 22-23. And the report is proposing, and this was accepted by Policy and Resources Committee, that the balance of 200,000 to be funded for 21-22 be met from the corporate contingency budget. Now, the corporate contingency budget is 300,000, so there is sufficient money in the corporate contingency to fund that 200,000. Plus, we know that there's some windfall money that will allow us to top up the corporate contingency. So that deals with 21-22 and gives members, I hope, reassurance that the local plan work can be funded. For next year, for 22-23, we'll deal with this as part of the usual annual budget process, but you can see from this that there's 135,000 that we're looking for, and ideally we'd be looking for another 100,000, because in the budget that was put forward for council, we assumed we'd bring forward 100,000 from future years for 22-23, which isn't ideal. So we'll be looking for an extra 235,000 when we're preparing the budget. But obviously that needs to be weighed up against all the other budget priorities, which is what we always do when we're agreeing a budget. So basically, to conclude, we have a viable budget for local plan review work for the current year, for 21-22, and plans for addressing the issue for 22-23. And I'm happy to take any questions that members may have on the report or the budget that's set out. Thank you.
I lost connection for a moment, so I just want to see if there's any indications to speak that I don't have.
There aren't any indications at the moment, Chairman.
Okay. And then one comes in. Councillor English.
Oh, I was going to try and get in.
Shouldn't we check whether Councillor Perry wishes to speak first, as he did say he might do?
Yeah.
My apologies. Yes, Councillor Perry, as visiting member, you go first. Yes.
Oh, thank you, Councillor English, and thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was struggling with the Aomb to make that point. Yes, and thank you, Mark, for this paper. I don't want to repeat what I think many of us have felt and still feel a little bit. I feel very queasy about this whole thing. I've got to admit, it's fine to you've used a lot, you depend a lot on the contingency, don't you, using contingency, and you're making big use of that in 21-22. And when you come to 22-23, you've got this 135k shortfall, and then it's not a brick wall at the end of that, is it? This is the local plan review will carry on. So for the following year, you're going to still have these issues coming back, and I'm just wondering where you're going to find the savings, because it seems to me it's just a little bit vague, all of it. That's was my problem right from the start in all of this. So I'm grateful for the work you've done, but it seems to me this work should have been done before we got to the stage we did at PNR and indeed at SPI when you first address this issue. I'm not trying to be critical on this. I know it's a difficult subject, but I do feel that we are a little bit vulnerable on all this, because there could be huge sums of money and we've got to find them somewhere. So that's my general observation of this, and I'll leave it obviously up to the committee to discuss. Thank you.
And now to you, Councillor English.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that, Councillor Perry. I don't entirely disagree, but it is a sort of how long is a piece of string situation, as you say.
Yeah.
But the local plan is perhaps the most important thing that we as a local authority do, apart from collecting refuse every week. So I suppose but that might be as equally as important. But other than that, it's probably the most important thing we do. So if there is going to be a call on our contingency, it's probably this is as likely a place that call should come. I have no particular reason to think that we would be unable to fund this, but as you say, Councillor Perry and Councillor Burton, this is a movable situation. Developments happen all the time. Budgets change, external funding that may or may not be available changes. So I'm reasonably comfortable with where we are, but I think we do need to keep this situation constantly under review so that we are not caught out or surprised by events, and that we are able to be flexible, and that we are also able to deliver not just a bare bones local plan, but a local plan that, as some of us have had discussions early on, contains the subsidiary documents and the non-spatial policies that will actually make this worth having for the people of Maidstone going forward. So I share your concerns, John, but I think all we can really do at the moment is keep it under review and be prepared to move money around if we have to.
Yeah, understood.
If there are no other indications, I'll have my say, and I'm probably going to duplicate some of the sentiments that were already expressed, but I'll perhaps use different words. So how long is a piece of string, says Councillor English. The piece of string needs to be long enough to fulfil the purpose for which it is necessary. And when we were invited to submit opinion for budget for full council, well, P&R to receive and then full council, we highlighted precisely these issues. And I think we made a good suggestion when in suggesting that perhaps some of the new homes bonus substitute grant should be deployed. I do not accept for 1 minute that we should not have been able to see this picture for what it is prior to full council considering budget. This is serious. This is very serious. My personal opinion is that some of the costings that we have before us now are very optimistic. I think I'm correct in saying that there's only 25,000 allowed for the DPD work that we've been wanting around certain additional policies, the good bits of planning that I think we're bereft of at the moment. And it horrifies me that we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, that we're bringing money forwards from future years to balance the scenario presented, when we know very, very well that this is now a hamster wheel of local plan reviewing that we're on. And the moment we finish this cycle, we must start again. And to be starting with having already spent half of the money for that year horrifies me. And finally, and I have discussed this previously with Mr. Green, I think it was quite wrong that this budget revision for SPY went to P&R before we had chance to provide our advice to them on the matter. And I would like that noted in the minutes that I have dissent on that matter. It is what it is. We must keep a very careful eye on this, but to my mind, it's overly optimistic, clearly underfunded, and we're storing up a problem for the next plan cycle before we start. I'll rest my case. Councillor Spooner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm prepared to have a very, very cautionary acceptance of what the officers are saying. I'm sure they're trying to be as prudent with the public funding as they possibly can. And I think, with the greatest respect, they are being optimistic. The real nitty-gritty, the real gut-rendering, the real meaty stuff of this local plan process has yet to come to us. Local plan inquiry or hearing, potential High Court challenges. Every local plan gets more and more complicated, more and more legally involved as they go forward. We can see it bubbling along underneath the surface. I think we have to go along with what we've got, but we need to have a very, very clear understanding that there could be a lot more expense just over the horizon. And I'm happy to move the papers as the recommendation as on the papers, but with a very, very cautionary warning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No further indications at this time. The matter this evening is fairly benign because we're not actually asked to do anything other than note. Councillor English, did you want to come back in?
I just wanted to second the motion, but like Councillor Spooner, I am filled with some trepidation, and like you, Mr. Chairman, I do think that the other additional non-spatial policies are somewhat underfunded, and we probably should raise a concern about that.
Well, members, do you not feel that we should actually make a reference back to P&R on this matter?
Specifically on that matter? Or?
Well, I think that would be one point that I would totally support.
Well, I do think I would raise some concern about that particular issue, Mr. Chairman.
I would support that, Mr. Chairman.
So could we be saying something that along the lines of this committee notes the report, but wishes to convey to P&R our deepest concerns that we are storing up a problem for the future, that we are concerned that there may be insufficient funding for the DPDs, and that we ask P&R make this a standing item on their agenda in order to have full surveillance on the matter.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, Mr. Chairman. You know I'm a big advocate of these DPDs.
Ditto.
Happy with that.
In order to move things along then, I think I definitely at least had a seconder on that amendment there from Patrick Arden and also Councillor English. If I hear no dissent, that referral back to P&R will be agreed. Thank you, members. I think that matter is dealt with for the time being. Shall we move on? Item 16, there's a consultation on the Swale Borough Council pre-submission draft plan. Ms Garnett, could you give us an introduction to this, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So this report provides the key details of the Regulation 19 consultation on the Swale Borough Council's local plan review. Regulation 19 is the final consultation on a local plan before it is submitted for examination. At this stage, comments are limited to those relating to matters of A, legal compliance, that is, does the plan comply with the relevant acts, and B, soundness, and that is whether the plan is considered to be positively prepared, justified, effective and consistent with national policy. So the plan consultation has been accompanied by a range of supporting evidence and documents, and it is also being tested against the habitat regulations. The report and the attached response notes and welcomes the fact that Swale is seeking to meet its increased housing need as set out by the government's standard methodology. For members' benefit, the report outlines the strategy for the Swale local plan review, and this is a shift in focus of housing growth from Sittingbourne, which has been subject to some sort of historic constraints, to an increase in the growth of Faversham, and there is also some growth on the Isle of Sheppey. The settlement of Tyneham is identified also as an area of opportunity for growth. The report notes that gypsy and traveller accommodation assessment provides evidence to support the provision of gypsy and traveller pitches, but it is not clear whether in meeting its needs, Swale will sort of seek to meet the higher or lower figure identified in that accommodation assessment. Accordingly, the response letter seeks clarification on this point. In terms of air quality and transport, the plan seeks to include mitigation to reduce its impacts on roads in Swale and in the wider area. Finally, whilst the plan has been backed up by extensive duty to cooperate between Maidstone and Swale, and no doubt other adjoining authorities to Swale, and Maidstone considers that Swale has fulfilled its duty, the response letter requests that Swale provides perhaps stronger evidence of the work that has been undertaken to date. So in summary, the report and letter seek further clarification on the gypsy and traveller need and further evidencing of duty to cooperate, just so to reinforce the work that has been done to date. These matters are matters for clarity and do not undermine the legal compliance or soundness of the plan. Finally, I would just like to add one point of correction. Page 2, paragraph 3 of the letter refers to junction 17 of the M20. This is a typing error and should refer to junction 7. Thank you.
Thank you. No visiting members on this one. So to you, Councillor Garton.
Hang on, I indicated before.
Oh, I do apologise.
Please, Councillor English, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, Councillor English, you have the precedent there. Councillor English?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm having a mouse problem. Yes, I had the fun of, for another reason, of going through a submission on Dartford's Regulation 19 for the very same reasons recently. And it's quite clear that, you know, within the limited parameters of Regulation 19, the comments that the officers have made are really the only comments that we could make in relation to the soundness or otherwise of the policies set out in the Swale local plan. There are some we may or may not agree with, but that is a different matter entirely from legal compliance or soundness or duty to cooperate. So as far as I can see, having read through the documents, they do conform to all the requirements set out in national planning policy guidance. Having said that, just for the record, I think it's pronounced Tenem and not Tyneham, but just a nitpick.
My apologies.
No, it's all right. Local factors. Unless Patrick, of course, may have more local knowledge, being rather nearer to the Swale border than I am. But as far as I can see, there's nothing to object to other than the points that the officers have already flagged up.
Councillor Garton.
Well, yes, thank you, Councillor English. You exactly hit the nail on the head. I have severe concerns, obviously, with the proposed motorway junction works on the A249, which is forthcoming in the years rather sooner than later, which will create a lot of traffic through my ward, the North Downs. Further development on top of which may just be a temporary glitch for a few years while the works are under construction, but a longer permanent glitch would be additional traffic and back route running through the North Downs. And since that is an Aonb with mainly single truck roads, which are already at capacity, and we haven't seen the postman for the last 2 weeks. I think he fell into one of the potholes. So really the road network in the North Downs is beyond stretch, and maybe you could make an amendment to raise the concern of the ward member for the North Downs, myself, about the additional surplus traffic which may stretch into the North Downs, to avoid that, for an emphasis of motorists to always use trunk roads wherever possible, and to put particular measures into the road planning plans. Thank you.
So I think I need to test with other members if there's a support for some wording to that effect, or whether they consider it to be a matter for an individual response. Councillor English.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is we need to show within the requirements for Regulation 19 that Swale Council haven't done some work to demonstrate that they have mitigated any impacts, and that their failure to mitigate any impacts actually makes their plan unsound. As I said, disagreeing with the approach from Swale Council isn't really what's being asked for in this consultation. What we would need to do if we were going to say that we had an objection to that would have to be, I think Patrick may have been alluding to this, would be to actually say that we feel that there is some clarification needed on the mitigation strategy to overcome the traffic that would be generated. A subtly slightly different approach, but I think that's what we would have to do as a committee if we were raising this as an issue. So there would be clarification about the mitigation strategy adopted in the local plan to mitigate any traffic impact in that area.
That seems fairly reasonable to me, and we could also ask our officers to take the matter forwards with future duty to cooperate meetings. Councillor Mackay.
I'll pass on this. Quite frankly, I didn't really understand what Patrick was going on about. Is he opposing the junction improvements on the A249? I don't think so. Come on, whenever there's road improvements, there's disruption to traffic. The idea of the road improvements are to reduce the diabolical situation that is currently in place on the A249. But anyway.
Mr. Chairman, if I may come back.
Yes, please do.
Councillor Mackay is absolutely right. I'm not opposing any improvements to the roadworks. I'm just foreseeing problems which will happen inevitably over the next couple of years while those improvements are taking place. Plus my concern in the longer term of obviously added traffic, and whenever people get used to using back routes, it will take a long time to get it back out of their system. So even once improvements have taken place on the A249 and Junction 5, I do not want to have a permanent long-term overspill from that. Plus, I am very concerned about extra traffic of people using back roads. I either coming from Sittingbourne, from Swale, from the new development areas in order to travel to Maidstone, or otherwise, it is a concern that traffic is increasing all the time in the North Downs.
Councillor Mrs. Grigg, can I come to you now?
Thank you, Chair. Basically, I slightly disagree. I think that this should be a personal response from the ward member. I think actually there are fundamental concerns for Swale in this, but there's no issues here for Maidstone Borough to rock the boat. They're meeting their needs, and personally, I'd rather this comes through as a personal a response from Councillor Garton about his ward.
Okay. You don't want to support Councillor English's idea of just asking for clarification on the
I personally don't feel it's necessary for this.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't necessarily saying the committee should endorse that. I was saying that if Councillor Garton wished to pursue it, that was the way he could pursue it as a representation. I think it would probably be best coming from him rather than the committee.
Well, I sense then that the committee are minded to support the the response as drafted with the papers. And should we just attach to that we ask officers to consider that at future duty to cooperate meetings as well?
Well, we can ask the question.
Yeah, if you can.
Can we just put it on their radar that they can have a watching briefing in conversation there?
Going forward, yes.
Okay then. Well, then, for the chair, I'll move as per the papers.
And I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Gregg. If I hear no dissent, we'll consider that agreed. That's therefore agreed. Agenda item 17 comes next. I hope this is actually a good news story. Mrs. Cunningham, could you help us with the conservation area appraisal management plans, the work programme update, please?
Thank you, Chairman. This report's actually going to be introduced by Paul Robertshaw, and I will be introducing item 18. So I'll pass you over to Paul.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report updates members on the progress of the work programme to produce conservation area appraisal and management plans. Since the previous report to this committee in September 2020, appraisals for the following areas have been adopted and published. They are Sutton Valence, Maidstone Ashford Road, Maidstone Chillington House and Maidstone Centre, and they were adopted on the 18th of January. Appendix 1 of the report shows which areas now have adopted appraisals, and that's 14 of the 41 areas. Since the previous report, draft documents have been produced for Yalding, Lenham Elmstone Hole and Harrietsham East Street. These will be shortly made available for public consultation and then adopted under delegated powers. And then, in accordance with the 2019 agreed work programme, the next areas to be reviewed will be Lenham Village and Headcorn. And members will be updated on progress towards the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robertshaw. Councillor English, I think you're first on this one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Robertshaw, for that succinct but very uplifting report. As you said at the start, Mr. Chairman, this is a good news story. It's encouraging to see that the council took an opportunity when it was suggested by Councillor Mumford and myself to move forward with a programme on this, taking the opportunity of the Business Rates Retention Fund to move us forward and actually achieve more in, I think, a year and a bit on conservation area appraisals and management plans than we've done for quite some time. So congratulations to all concerned, and let's get as much done as we can while the opportunity lasts.
And next to Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, my question, I mean, if we look on page 95, clearly there's a number of conservation areas that don't have projected plans in place or a schedule in place, should I say. In my own area, clearly Lewes Valley is it comes from obviously the village of Lewes towards my area of Tovel. On the other side of my ward, I've got North Lewes and Tovel. My question is, there seems to be an appetite with the parishes, given the importance to parishes. I do wonder whether some funding could be sought from the parishes. In my area, I just have Tovel Parish Council, and I do wonder, given the importance of the Lewes Valley at that point, whether this is something that potentially the council could go out with cap in hand to see if there's some funding that could be provided by the people that are affected the most by these plans. But I also I wonder about I wonder whether we could go to the developers as part of the local plan. I mean, we've got in almost all of these areas that don't have dates, we have housing pressure and we have seal, and we do sort of look at the wider area and open spaces around development. And I'm just wondering if that would also be an opportunity to secure funding. My concern is that we're doing this very piecemeal, and there's always the risk in tight budgets that we might come to a point where we just literally fall off a cliff and we can't go further. But I'm just thinking that the people that would lose most by that might also be willing to sort of help the process along. I'd be interested in officers' views on this.
I can just come back on that if it would help. I think we've had a 2-year programme which was agreed, and that was based around the funding available and the officer time that allowed for, and that's fitted quite neatly within that 2-year period. I think then towards the end of this year there'll be an opportunity to look again at what the priorities are, what funding might be available. Voluntary help might be a very good option to help with that as well. So I think it's for the next round of work when I think it'd be very useful to have that conversation.
I wonder if we could perhaps put it on the work programme just to keep that on our radar, just so that we do sort of keep focused when it comes around towards the end of this year.
Apologies, I lost connection for a moment there, but I think you were saying about putting it on a work programme.
Yes, I think that given, I'm happy with the response. I'm happy for us to come back to this. But I just feel that, you know, rather than it die a death and in 2 years' time we sort of look back and think that never happened, I think it would be a good item to put on the work programme, and I'm happy to propose that we do.
I'm just thinking that through as to what it is we're actually putting on the work programme. I was, as you were suggesting it, I was thinking to myself, not much chance of getting parishes to pay for something like this. But then I thought to myself, well, a lot of them are going to have because you referred to the development, the non-strategic element of SIL at their disposal. And I'm just wondering what the mechanism for putting that suggestion in front of them ought to be.
I mean, going back to officers, between now and the end of the year, what work would be done to sort of consider the next steps when this funding ends? Can we have maybe a short paper, maybe in October time or November?
Well, let's not take this any further other than to say, yes, we'll put that on the work programme then. And it's a paper to consider options for further funding of the conservation areas work.
I'm happy with that.
Right. You're happy with that, Councillor Mrs. Grigg? We'll put that on the work programme?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, good. Right. Councillor Mumford?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I agree with, if people can remember it, what Councillor English actually said. We've been scrabbling around for funds for this project, and we really have got it started now, so I'm really pleased to see it going. I thought the officer said that the reports that are now being consulted on, and they're in draft, would be coming to us at the end of the year anyway, so I was pleased to see the momentum was carried on. As for the suggestion that the parishes pay for their conservation areas to be appraised, I'm really against that. For years and years, and I am talking years and years, we've ignored this, and it is a borough responsibility. And then to go back to the parishes to use their precept to fund something that we should have been funding is quite wrong. And as Denise Cunningham will know, that I offered volunteers to help, and I think you can go for help but not money. I really am looking at something like double taxation there, because it is our responsibility to do it, and it's something we have ignored for years. But I'd like to say to the officers, well done, we've got it going, we've got funds as and when, and it should be looked at as something that we need to fund each year until we've completed what is our responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. But can I just draw that point out a little bit with you? So I think my first instinct agrees with you, asking parishes to use precept money for it. But do you have a feeling on the non-strategic SIL pot that they will receive?
Yeah, I do have a feeling there. Yes, I think that is a possibility to explore. where they have got sill, whether they will be willing to use their sill to get this done. That's an area to explore, but not precept.
Just to clarify, Chairman, it wasn't precept that I was looking at. It was more to do with the funding that might be coming in and the benefits that might be. There's harm that will be there'll be harm that will be coming to the villages from development, and I just think that that's something we need to look at more.
Okay, I think we've all got the gist of that now. Losing track here a little bit. Councillor Garton, have I covered you?
No, I just wanted to wholly agree with Councillor Mumford, what he was saying. Looking at the Appendix 1 on page 95, 4 of those conservation areas are in my ward. None of them is being scheduled for any appraisal or whatever. I raised the issue with the local parish councils, but at the end of the day, I think the rural taxpayer, council taxpayer, should get equal value for money as the urban council taxpayer. So if we are putting money, we ought to be putting money from the central Maidstone pot rather than asking parish councils to fund these appraisals.
And Councillor English.
Just want to object to the concept that parish councils are necessarily rural. I mean, if you look at Tovel, which is where we started, whilst it does include a substantial part of the Lewes Valley, most of the population of Tovel would not consider themselves rural residents. And there are a number of other parishes in that area. But that aside, I agree with the concept. Having said that, if we can take money for the town centre plan, which is definitely needed, from SIL, or Section 106, then clearly, that in principle, I don't see any reason why money in another part of Maidstone for an equally important appraisal or management plan can't be used for the same thing. I mean, it's essentially a similar situation. So in principle, I don't have any objection. The devil is often in the detail of these things, but we need to be innovative in terms of looking for funding for things we really need to do, which will actually save us as a council time and money in the long term. So yeah, I think the principle's more or less been established. It's just a question of applying it.
I think there's an interesting point within what you've just said there, Councillor English, because I personally think that the pressure on the strategic SIL pot for the more major infrastructure projects is going to be immense. But you're quite right identifying the town centre work from specific 106s and maybe to ask for some 106 conditions on some developments that are directly aimed at assisting with mitigation through conservation work might be another way forwards.
Indeed, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. But Mr. Robert Shaw, I think you're definitely hearing that there's an appetite for more of this good work. So if we can get some money, prepare to be further busy. We're simply asked to note this evening. We've already recorded that we'll put the other matter on the work programme, so if I hear no dissent, we'll consider it to be noted. And that's duly noted. Item 18, and this time it is Mrs. Cunningham, please, for the Kent Downs Aomb Management Plan adoption.
Thank you, Chairman. Areas of outstanding natural beauty, or AONBs, are designated under the 1949 National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act for the primary purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the landscape. The secondary purpose is to take account of agriculture, forestry, rural industries and the economic and social needs of local communities. Promotion of sustainable forms of economic development that conserve and enhance the environment is clearly important, as is consideration of the demand for recreation where consistent with the conservation of natural beauty. The preparation and publication of an AONB management plan is a statutory duty imposed by the Countryside and Rights of Way Act, or CROW Act 2000. Therefore, any local authority with Aombs in their areas are required to produce, adopt and keep plans under review. The Kent Downs Aomb was first published in 2004 and is required to be reviewed every 5 years, and this is the third review. The current 2014 to 2019 management plan has remained in place due to delays. One of those was a question about the role of policies within the plan, and then there have been various timing issues, obviously, with the general election and the COVID lockdowns. The revised plan for 2021 to 2026 strongly reflects the adopted management plan, but brings it up to date in terms of guidance, legislation, and obviously the findings of the engagement and stakeholder consultation exercises. In September 2020, this committee considered the Council's consultation response on the draft plan, and the comments were then fed back to the Kent Downs Aonb. The redrafted plan reflects the comments made by the Council through strengthening of wording in various places, clarification, and the inclusion of a new glossary of which covers the issues over the terms used. A summary of the general changes is covered in paragraph 2.16 of my report. After the Kent Downs Aomb Joint Advisory Committee meeting in January this year, the redrafted plan for adoption has been circulated, as has Natural England's confirmation that the revised plan conforms with guidance, statutory requirements and good practice. As there's a legal requirement for this council to adopt the Aonb management plan, and all 12 authorities need to adopt the same plan, there needs to be the ability for minor changes to be made without putting the whole plan in jeopardy. Hence the recommendation, which is to adopt the management plan with delegated powers given to the head of planning development to accept minor changes prior to formal adoption. And clearly, the date for formal adoption can only be agreed once the last of the 12 local authorities has approved it. For information, a number of local authorities have already resolved to adopt the plan on this basis. Then finally, following the formal adoption, the management plan will be published and deposited with the Secretary of State as required by the Crow Act. Thank you.
Thank you for your very succinct introduction there. Anybody wishing to address this item? Councillor Garton.
Yeah, if I may first ask a quick question. Option 3.3 and 3.2, the difference is the approving of delegated authority to make minor amendments. Is that purely for the case when another local authority says, well, there's a little minor tweak, but we would like to have that implemented, that you simply could say yay or nay without bringing it back to this committee?
Yes, it is related to minor tweaks, and anything obviously other than minor tweaks would need to come back formally to committee.
Yeah, so if it is mainly for minor tweaks to open up and clear the channels between the different partners of this plan, then I am happy to propose option 3.3, option C, as per papers. I'm a member of the Joint Advisory Committee, and a lot of work went in there. We had a lot of meetings. The Aonb unit, to which all member local authorities subscribe to, is an excellent body of great experts, and we attended a lot of sessions, and I personally attended a few sessions on particular parts of this plan outside the Joint Advisory Committee as well. So there's gone in a lot of work. I also notified members throughout my reports and throughout the last half year when the first draft came out. And I haven't really heard any feedback from committee members, so I am happy to wholly support this management plan and bring it on its well-deserved way.
Thank you, Councillor Garland. So I think you've moved as per the papers at page 96. I'll be looking for a seconder. And Councillor Clark, you've indicated to speak. To second, in fact.
I'm happy to second. I do have a question, actually, a small question for the officers, and that's to do with when we did the country park. The government did the country parks consultation. It was very clear that to get a new Aomb would be something that would be more decades than years. And there were some discussions at that point about additions to the Aomb, the North Downs Aomb, rather than going the route of a completely separate one that might take 20 or 30 years. Are there actually considerations at the moment for additions to the Aomb?
We're still waiting the government's response to the government review on protected landscapes, and I think once that comes out, we were going to take a view on it. But certainly, nothing's off the table at the moment, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, that's a separate issue to this, but I just thought I'd ask to get a sense of it.
I think we have a watching brief on that one, Councillor Clark. So we'll all be looking up for the government's response there.
Happy to move this forward.
Right. So it moved and seconded. No further indications, unless that's Councillor Mumford wanting to. No. Moved and seconded. If I hear no dissent, I'll consider that agreed. That's therefore agreed. Thank you, members. And so to item 19, our standing item, local plan review update. Mr. Edgerton.
Thank you, Chairman. As noted at the previous meeting of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee, approximately 3,200 responses were received to the Regulation 18B consultation, and work is now being finalised in respect of the processing of those responses. Work on the local plan review continues at pace, and this includes work on supporting information and the wider evidence base, such as specialist studies and evidence papers. The specialist studies include detailed transport and air quality modelling, as well as evidence updates to the Economic Development Needs Study, Strategic Housing Market Assessment and Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment, for example. The wider work includes analysis of the Regulation 18 Preferred Approaches consultation, which is to be reported as part of the evidence base and Regulation 19 proposals. New assessments are also being undertaken, including a heritage assessment and viability assessment. Discussions have also been ongoing with site promoters, including the promoters of garden communities at Lidsing and Heathlands. The promoters are working up evidence to demonstrate that their schemes can potentially be included in the Local Plan Review Regulation 19 document. One of the subject matters for discussion with promoters has been land ownership, and at this stage, officers are content that land ownership will not be a barrier to the Lidsing and Heathlands garden communities coming forward. Finally, a reminder to members that this report is for noting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Not sure if anybody's wishing to speak. Councillor Mumford.
Yes, just to clarify something in my mind. We had a question at the beginning by Miss Harwood relating to the 1,700 responses. Did they come in late or something, or was it just the way the question was put? I'm just sat here confused of why we got the question. Were they late?
No, I think it was a case of our attention being drawn to them and the quantum. And I think we did cover that when the consultation responses were reported to us.
Yeah, okay.
And I think we also noted the geographical spread of some of those responses from the Medway side of things as well.
Okay.
So no, just drawing our attention to it, I believe, and it's firmly on our radar, I'm sure. If there are no further indications, it's for reporting. If I hear no for noting, if I hear no dissent, we'll consider it to be noted, and that is duly noted. And that concludes our business for this evening. And dare I say it, I think it possibly concludes our business for this municipal year. And I would really like to take this opportunity to thank all of the members of the committee for the way that everybody has worked together. I think cooperation across party has been excellent. Nobody's played political games with any of the weighty matters that we've had to deal with. And irrespective of the outcome of the elections that are shortly in front of us, I hope that when this committee is reconvened in the next municipal year, that the work will continue in that same manner. And I would like to thank Councillor Mrs. Grigg for all of her work as Vice Chair of this committee this year. And of course, thanks to all the officers for everything they've been doing to support us through what has been a very, very challenging process. And without further ado, I am Councillor English.
I just wanted to say how much I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. If there is any area of a council's work where party politics should be not necessarily non-existent, but not the most important consideration, it's in planning and planning policy. And thank you for everything that people have done across party and officers as well this municipal year. And we've achieved some good things. A lot of work still to do, but a lot of good outcomes.
And thank you to you, Mr. Chair, for an excellent year in the chair.
Thank you. Well, I think that concludes our matters for this evening and for this year. And the meeting is now closed at 19:42. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Sue and the officers. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you all.
Yeah.